What is going on, people? Triple M back again with another video. I hope you guys are doing well. Today, I would like to talk about Arsenal Football Club, as following their trophyless, bitter and disappointing season, there's been a lot of discussion amongst Arsenal fans, but also amongst rival fans, as to what Arsenal need to do in order to bridge the gap between themselves and Manchester City, and alternatively, to bridge the gap between themselves and other teams in Europe, so that they can maybe start competing on the continent more regularly since they're back in the Champions League, and also pick up some domestic trophies along the way. And one of the positions that has sort of been, I would say, universally agreed on by most rival fans, not all rival fans, but most rival fans, at least the ones that I interact with anyways, it seems to be the striker position. And it's quite a contentious position, because you've got Kai Havertz, who obviously overperformed and obviously went against all popular prediction and had a really good season for Arsenal. Then you also have the fact that Arsenal have scored a lot of goals. Even without Kai Havertz, they've scored a lot of goals as a team. And so the counter argument to this point that Arsenal need a number 9 from Arsenal fans usually is, well, we've scored loads of goals, and the fact that our goals are spread out throughout the team, as opposed to us relying on a number 9, is actually a good thing, because that's part of what makes Arsenal so dynamic, so fluid in terms of their attack. But it's quite obvious that people aren't talking about Arsenal in general across an entire season. People are talking about Arsenal in those crunch moments. When it comes to people saying that Arsenal need a number 9, we're talking about the game against Bayern Munich. We're talking about the game against Aston Villa at home. We're talking about the game against Fulham when you're up by a man and Fulham are down to 10 men and you still can't close out the game. We're talking about the West Ham game away. We're talking about these pivotal moments in the season where there is no margin for error against a team in Manchester City with a manager like Pep Guardiola, who are damn near perfect, and you don't have any margin for error. You need a proper out-and-out gunman who will sniff out that one chance in a poor game where things aren't going your way and just put it away. That one game that you have no business winning because you've been awful the entire game, but you steal it at the end because you've got that gunman who just has just a nose for goal, an absolute bloodhound. And that's where Benjamin Sesko comes in, right? Is he the right profile for Arsenal? Because they've been linked with him over the last couple of weeks. And more importantly, forget profile, is he actually good enough for Arsenal Football Club? I'm not convinced. And I'm going to talk about why in this video, because when you look at, first let's start with the pros, right? He's a 2-footed player, 6'4", very tall, very physical. He's pretty quick as well, so he's got the mobility. And on top of that, he's got good instincts in the box. He's somebody who is an out-and-out number 9, which Arsenal currently don't have. So that's obviously a tick. And he is obviously a very young player with so much potential. You look at his goal catalogue, he's scored such a wide variety of goals. Strikes from outside the box, tap-ins from inside the box, goals where he's set up the opportunity himself by dribbling and maybe beating a man and then smashing it into the top right corner, right? He's scored a wide variety of goals, and he has, for such a young player, he has such a beautiful goal catalogue. On top of that, he's somebody who, again, as I reiterate, for being 6'4", is pretty quick. That's really important, not just for wiggling through tight spaces and obviously being an effective number 9 in the modern game, especially in the Premier League with it being so physical, but it's very helpful for playing on the counter. It's very helpful for being an outlet in those games where you're perhaps not having loads of the ball, which is rare for Arsenal these days, let's be honest. But imagine they had someone like a Sesko against Manchester City at the Etihad, right? Where they were actually sitting back and trying to hit Manchester City on the counter, right? Imagine they had an out-and-out number 9 who had the physical pace and the explosiveness, but also the instincts in the box, right? Who could actually maybe just nick a goal and maybe get them 3 points instead of 1 at the Etihad, right? Those are the pros of someone like Benjamin Sesko. But the list of cons for me is much longer when it comes to a player like him, because first of all, he doesn't start many games for Leipzig. He's not a guaranteed starter. That's number 1, which is red flag number 1. Number 2, I think he's not particularly good in the air. And for a 6'4" striker, that's not good. For a striker that big, you want to be physically imposing in the air, and you want him to be able to be useful for set pieces and corners, etc., etc. Number 3, his hold-up play isn't particularly great. It's not terrible, but it isn't particularly great. And if you're not particularly great in the Bundesliga, then you're not going to be particularly great in the Premier League, definitely, right? Because the jump in level is going to be more difficult. That's almost one of the biggest issues when it comes to Benjamin Sesko, bigger than the ones I mentioned before, because when you look at how Arsenal play, hold-up is so important for 2 reasons. One, Arsenal dominate the ball a lot. So as a striker, you're going to spend a lot of time playing with your back to goal, right? And so you don't have the luxury of being at a team where you're waiting for a through ball or a long diag over the top that you can then chase whilst you're facing the goal, right? You're probably going to have your back to goal. And two, it helps elevate the rest of the team. And that's the thing that Kai Havertz, I think, almost doesn't get praised for enough. Yes, he scored goals for Arsenal and he shocked people in that aspect of the game. But really what Kai Havertz brings to the team as a false nine or as a nine is his hold-up. He is able to elevate the rest of the team and bring other people into play and make other people better. Sometimes that is more important than goals. In fact, almost all the time, it's more important than goals in a team where you've got a Saka, you've got a Martinelli, you've got an Odegaard, you've got other people who can contribute in terms of the goals, right? Very similar to a Firmino at Liverpool, where he had Salah and Mane next to him. He didn't need to score goals. All he needed to do was make sure that he provided them with a platform to succeed. Similar to Jesus when he was at City. Granted, he wasn't starting every week, but around the time that City didn't really have a number 9, that transition period between Aguero facing a lot of injuries and not being quite fit enough to them signing Haaland, there was a gap in between where City weren't playing with the number 9. Gundogan even stepped into the false 9 for City at some point as well when they had a lot of injuries, and he was brilliant. Again, he scored a lot of goals, which people praised him for, but it wasn't the goals. It was the hold-up. It was the ability to elevate the rest of the team, the ability to hold the ball and give his teammates enough time and buy them opportunities to get into space whilst keeping the defenders occupied. That's really important, right? But beyond that, another issue, a glaring issue with Benjamin Sesko is, I believe in the past season with Leipzig, he had 31 appearances in the Bundesliga, not all of them being starts, obviously, and that's very important to mention. He doesn't start as much as you would like for a striker coming to a title-challenging Arsenal side. 31 appearances, 14 goals. 8 appearances in the Champions League, only 2 goals, right? And this is a pretty decent return for a striker of his age when you apply the context and you understand the fact that he was going from Salzburg to Leipzig, which is a pretty big jump, right? Going from Austria to Germany in the Bundesliga. It's a pretty big jump, right? And that's pretty decent, I would say, a pretty decent return. If I was a Leipzig fan, I wouldn't be mad at that per se. But if I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm looking at those numbers and I'm thinking, okay, we're expecting a drop-off when he gets to the Premier League, right? And if he's barely hitting that threshold of 15, 16 goals in the Bundesliga, granted it's only his first season, that's cause for concern. In fact, it's a massive red flag if I'm an Arsenal fan. If I'm an Arsenal fan and I'm expecting my team to win a Premier League soon, and I'm expecting them, or at the very least expecting them to challenge for Premier League again next season, I don't want a striker where there is a huge element of risk. I want a striker who's going to minimize risk as much as possible. And again, it's very difficult to talk about strikers because people will say, well, who in the striker market now is going to guarantee you 20 goals per season? It's not necessarily about getting 20 goals per season because, again, Arsenal have goals in that team. They're not short on goals. It's just those crunch moments where you need something different, either off the bench or in the starting 11 to make the difference in those games. And I think that's the area where I would be very reserved over a player like Sesko because of his age, the fact that he's so raw, the fact that he's so unpolished, and the fact that he lacks experience at the elite level, meaning specifically the top 5 leagues in Europe and the Champions League. He doesn't have a lot of experience in those competitions. It's cause for concern. He's got a very impressive goal catalogue. You know, he's 2-footed, 6'4". He seems like a very promising player with pace and power. He's got all the basic attributes in addition to his instinct and his spatial awareness. He's got all the basic attributes to be a top tier number 9. It's now just about letting him cook, letting him develop, letting him marinate. I don't think Arsenal should be bringing in a player that they need to develop, especially when they don't have a senior gunman where he can learn from. It would be a different conversation if Arsenal already had a top number 9, but signing a developmental player who's not quite there yet when you're trying to challenge for trophies and you're trying to win major honors, I don't know, man. It's a no from me, but I'm a United fan, you know? So let me know what you think if you are an Arsenal fan, or alternatively, if you're a rival fan, in the comments down below. It's been your boy Triple M. Leave a like on the video, subscribe if you are new. Peace.